Good morning and welcome to Urban Update. I'm Alberto Vasallo. Now, imagine if more people knew the best practices for improving the lives of children and families. Imagine if advocates, health experts, policymakers, and political leaders from around the world could actually come together to converse, collaborate, and become catalysts for significant change. Well, from the 19th through the 22nd of June, Wheelock College is presenting a conference entitled Global Challenges and Opportunities Facing Children, Youth, and Families. Now, joining me this morning to tell us a little bit more about the conferences are Dr. Gail Dines. Now, she's a professor of sociology and women's studies at Wheelock. She's also the author of the book Pornland, How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality. We'll ask her a little bit about that later. And via Skype, we have Norma Ramos, Executive Director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. She's also a human rights lawyer. She's joining us again from Skype from New York. Welcome to Urban Update. Thank you for coming, or thank you for being with us, Norma.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Norma, hang in there because I'm going to start with your colleague here, Gail. Gail, tell me a little bit, not only about kind of the conference, a little overview, but why Wheelock? Why so important that is happening at Wheelock?
Well, Wheelock's actually the obvious place for a conference on human rights, because we're one of the few colleges, I would say, in the country that really fuse rigorous scholarship with an activist agenda. What we're trying to produce at Wheelock are not just people who are going to get jobs. We are trying to produce leaders in their field who are going to go on and become advocates for people in various areas. So what we take very seriously is getting our students engaged as citizens, and we do it through both scholarship and we do it through internships, and we combine those to get them out into the real world doing real world work.
So in other words, Wheelock is a place for a lot of our youth who want to change the world, who want to be engaged with all of these situations, global situations around the world. And you guys are very unique because you actually have one course that's very, very unique to the college, correct?
Well, actually, we have a new major, which is called Political Science and Global Studies, which in and of itself is quite unique, because what we decided to do in that major is to bring those people who are normally marginalized, who don't get much say, you know, people of color, white women, poor people in developing countries, and we have brought them to the center of our curriculum. It is their stories that get told. Now, within that major, one of the courses we're offering is called the Politics of Sex Trafficking, and what makes that so unusual is it is co-taught by a law enforcement official and a woman who was formerly trafficked, who now does activism to help get women out of trafficking. And the combination of the two of them, the students just love, as you can imagine.
I can imagine. And what I'd love to imagine is Norma's participation, because she is the Executive Director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, and she's one of the panelists in this upcoming conference. So Norma, tell me a little bit about what we can expect, some of the subject matters that your panel will be addressing at Wheelock College.
Well, we're going to talk about prostitution, which is the end point of sex trafficking, and it is the world's oldest oppression. And we need to develop a human rights-based and women's rights-based analysis of prostitution, which has been developing now for quite a while now with abolitionists like myself and Professor Dines. And we're going to talk about why it is important to take a principled stand against the prostitution industry, the pornography industry, which is detailed in Dr. Dines' book, how the pornography industry has hijacked our sexuality. And we're going to make the links between prostitution and sex trafficking, between pornography and socializing men to become men who want to buy pornographic sex, which is what prostituted sex is.
Norma, I want to, before we come back to Gail, I want you to try to put in perspective. I mean, you talked about prostitution, sex trafficking. Give us an idea of how common this happens. Let's just localize it as much as you can. Maybe the United States, maybe the Northeast, maybe Massachusetts, if you've got anything that can kind of put it in perspective for us.
Well, you know what's important to understand about that? We don't have a major national study on what the rate is of prostitution in the United States, and we really could have one. All we have to do is really tally up all the prostitution arrests that go on in every municipality, every little town across the United States, put it in a database. And that is a good way to start getting a picture of what is happening in terms of the sex industry in the United States. And I really think it's about time that the U.S. Justice Department and the Obama administration put resources towards getting a clear picture of the level and rate of prostitution that's going on into this country, because that is the end point of sex trafficking. And the average age of entry into prostitution, we're finding, is 13.
Wow, very, very young. And before we go to commercial break, I did want to mention, because when we come back I want to tease this, but it's very important, your book, Pornland, How Pornland Has Hijacked Our Sexuality, kind of talks about this and treats it. So you've got some interesting research about that, correct?
Well, my argument is that unless you believe men are born Johns, then you have to look at the culture that turns a man into a John, and that's what that book really is about.
And we will come back. We will absolutely come back. When Urban Update returns, I'll definitely have more conversation about Wheelock's upcoming conference and these other subject matters. Stay tuned. The goal of the Wheelock College Conference is to address 3 interwoven strands of importance to the entire global community. 1 is education, 2 is health, and 3 is human rights. I'm talking with my friend now, my good friend, Professor of Sociology and Women's Studies at Wheelock College, Dr. Gail Dines. Now, you're also an author, and before we went to commercial, we talked a little bit about the book. The book is entitled Pornland, How Porn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality, and we talked a little bit with Norma before. How is this all interwoven, and how does this lead to the important subject matter that we're going to be dealing with at the Wheelock Conference?
Well, I think one of the things that Norma and I both talk about is the fact that much of the sex industry is a violation of women's human rights, because women in the sex industry are basically reduced just to sex objects. There's nothing else to them, and that violates really what they need to do to live in the world. It violates their ability to earn money. It violates their ability to have good jobs, to have safe housing. So the sex industry is actually a form of human rights violation. On a more sort of global scope in terms of the conference, one of the things we're trying to do is bring together thought leaders, often people who are not in the same room together, often who are siloed in their own areas or their own organisations, and to put them in a room together in different workshops and to try and build some creative and thoughtful ideas about how do we tackle the most pressing issues of the world today. And of course, because it's at Wheelock, what we always do is centre on children, because what we believe that our society is only as good as our children's health, right? We have a collective and compelling interest in the well-being of our next generation. And again, that's what makes Wheelock so really unique out there in the colleges.
Yeah. I'm going to now go to Norma. I know she's in New York, and she's via Skype, Executive Director of Coalition Against Trafficking in Women and a panelist at the conference coming up. You're listening to Gail here. I know you guys have worked together and so forth, but how important is it for, again, the lay person who's watching this to really be aware of what's going on in terms of trafficking, and specifically what you address, trafficking in women here in the United States and around the world?
You know, it's what Dr. Dines says in her book. She represents, and I liked listening to how she talked about the role of Wheelock developing leaders. She herself embodies that, because who you have with this wonderful professor, Dr. Dines, is one of the few voices in the world courageous enough to take on the sex industry. And she has described how we're living in a world where male sexuality is being corrupted by the pornography industry. We at CATW have never believed that men are born to grow up to be men that sexually harass women, that sexually abuse girls. Where is this incredible range of abusive behavior towards women coming from? And very few academics have been willing to take on the socialization forces at play. Most will spend their time on researching that it's happening. But in the leadership coming out of Wheelock College in the form of Dr. Dines, she's challenging the forces that are at play, that are taking male sexuality and turning it into something ugly and destructive and dangerous to the well-being of women and girls.
Okay, and you used the word forces. I want to come to you. What are these forces specifically that you're rallying against?
Well, I think specifically what I would argue is that Pornography today has become the major form of sex education for boys. The average age of first viewing pornography is 11, and we're not talking here about your father's Playboy. We're talking about violent, misogynist, abusive images. Now, the question is, what does it mean to bring up a generation of boys on hardcore pornography? This is a social experiment. We have never done this before, and one of the things that I argue why Norma and I work together is that pornography drives demand for prostituted sex. It drives demand for trafficked women.
So you do see that correlation?
There's no question, absolutely. With it. If you don't see that correlation, then you're left with the very depressing view that somehow men are just biologically born to abuse women. And I certainly would never buy that. And I wouldn't buy that as a scholar. I wouldn't buy it as an activist, as a feminist, and most importantly, as a mother of a son. I would not buy that.
Now, in your book, you address the, technology now, because everything is right there. I mean, you can go on your phone right now and just go on anything,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah, download it right away. And remember that the pornographers have spent a huge amount of money developing the technology so that you can download.
They're ahead of the curve.
And financially, they're putting tons of money into R&D. That's exactly how they work. Yes.
So it's a very scary landscape if you're a parent of a male or a female, obviously for both.
Absolutely.
I want to come back to Norma before we end this. You will be coming to Boston to address some of these issues. Could you tell me a little bit more, if you know about some of the other panelists, and again, what could we get out of your particular panel? What you're hoping to project to those who come to your panel?
Well, I would like to increase the public's awareness about what human trafficking actually is, how it is taking place, how it is being facilitated through websites like Backpage.com, and what the online facilitation of sex trafficking means. Primarily, it means that communities are reporting that they don't have a human trafficking problem because they're not seeing it. It's all being carried out online, and then people are meeting up in hotels or homes and houses, and they're not aware that this is what's going on. By the way, to get back to your earlier point, the Johns are also telling us that there's a relationship between pornography and what they want to do through prostitution. The Johns are saying to prostituted women, this is what I want you to do. You see this girl in this picture or in this video? That's what I want you to do. So the Johns are actually coming right out with the fact that they're learning about what they want in sex through pornography.
Well, Norma, thank you so much. And Boston residents will get a chance to see and meet you late June over at Wheelock. Thank you again, Professor Dines.
And I hope you get a chance to experience the wonders of Wheelock and all that we offer the Boston area, all that we offer our students, and just basically the role that we play in building a better world.
Manchester accent?
Well, sort of muted Manchester accent.
Hey, you still got it. All right. Well, we'll see you there.
Okay, look forward to it.
Thank you. And thank you, Norma. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Now, when Urban Update returns, a new collaborative project that helps eligible legal permanent residents overcome barriers to naturalization. Right here on Urban Update.